1, 2, 3, yeah. I just wanna tell the truth. Can I tell the truth? Yeah. Oh yeah. That's all I wanna do. Yeah.
How do you put all of this talent in the ground?
They wanted me to do other things, but
He didn't have one enemy, one foe on the campus. And so that day, I still remember it was an overcast day.
For every Aric we lose, we've got to lift up 100 who are wandering, lost souls in this society.
You know I'm on a mission.
It seems that your greatest people, you're allowed to stay here in this world just a little while.
Bright lights making headlines, but headlines ain't never make me. Headlines ain't never make me. You can't break me. Okay. I used to want the big stage, bright lights making headlines, but headlines ain't never made me. Headlines ain't never make me. They can't break me now. They'll never break me. If I never see the stage, if I don't see the stage, even if I never get paid, I'ma do this for me. Yeah. I'ma do this for me. Yeah. And even if it means that I never see the fortune or the fame, I'ma sing even if they never call my name. My name, I be on a different level. I'm looking for something better. I gotta find peace of mind. Gotta find you. I gotta find peace of mind. Yeah. I used to want the big stage, bright lights making headlines. Hey, that go for everybody. But headlines ain't never make me. Headlines ain't never make me. Can't break me. I used to want the big stage, bright lights making headlines, but headlines ain't never made me. That's what God gave me. Headlines ain't never made me. They can't break me now. Yeah, I just wanna tell the truth. Hey, I do this for me and you.
I knew early on this kid was special. I knew, and not because he was my child, but he was a special kid. He didn't give me any problems at all, and I just knew that God had his hand upon his life really, really early. At the age of 4, I remember one day in particular, a older lady had passed. I was teaching Sunday school at the time, and I was her Sunday school teacher, and she passed. And so I had taken a break during the workday to attend the funeral. And after the funeral, I was just in a funk. Not so much so because of the older lady that had passed, but the funeral itself just kind of put me in a, just a funk that day. And for the rest of the afternoon, I cried uncontrollably. I was at my desk and I cried, and I just couldn't stop. I just couldn't pull myself together. But I, decided that before I pick Aric up, I needed to fix my face, because I didn't want him to see me, upset. And so I get to school, and I pick up Aric, and I said to him, he's 4, and I said, hey, how was your day? And he said it was fine. And I said, what did you do? And he said, I climbed up to heaven today to go see my dad. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, I climbed up to heaven today. I went to visit my daddy. And I said, oh, well, how did you get there? And he said, in a tree. I climbed up the tree and I went to see my dad. And I said, well, what did he say? This kid says to me, my daddy said you were crying all day long. He said snot was running all down your nose. When I tell you, I almost wrecked the car, because that was exactly how my afternoon had gone. And there was no way in the world that this kid knew how my afternoon had been. But he said that he had a visit to heaven and that his father told him that I had been a mess to the degree that snot was coming out of my nose. And at that moment, I knew that there was something about this kid that was special. And so, you know, here we are again, Aric, just like his father, church, and church.
In my last year in divinity school seminary, that some people would refer to, I took a class with a very well-known professor, the preeminent scholar on African religions, named Jacob Olupona. And Professor Olupona informed us quite naturally that there are levels to the spiritual realm, that there are different ways that these realms kind of manifest in existence. And so while you have the earthly realm above us, before you see God, you've seen the ancestors. And so they exist in this realm, this in-between realm between humanity and between the divine, and how they work or how they operate, they kind of move about as angels, kind of moving and interjecting into our lives, our daily struggles, our commitments, our fears, and our successes. They flow with us. You know, I think a Baptist preacher might call it a greater cloud of witnesses that kind of like hovers. You know, I think the language is very similar because it actually means the same thing. And so what I realized is that at a very young age, when I was around 5, I would do very, very crazy things that most people would not consider, you know, a 5-year-old to know what to do, you know. But I just had this sense, this urge, this calling I kind of felt that I could communicate with my father in like the strangest ways. And the truth is, it came out in my imagination above all things. It wasn't actually anything I could physically manifest or tangibly manifest, but it would come out in the way that I would talk about him. And there were literally things that I had no way of knowing from anyone else, that I would just know about him, and I would scare literally the hell out of my mother. She would be, you know, listening to me talk about him and say, like I think one time I told my grandmother I had never seen the car, you know, that he got into the accident in. You know, one day I'm just talking to her and I tell her the car was silver. She's like, well, how did you know that? You've never seen a picture. You know, I had this impulse, these feelings, you know, this kind of spiritual presence I felt like was hovering over me, and I didn't really know what to call it, but I felt like it must have been my father, because I felt like God, if anything, it was unfair for him to take my father. This is how I literally felt at the moment. I felt like it was unfair for him to take my father away from me and not give me something to suffice to fill that void that we talk about, right? So yeah, when I was growing up, I had a lot of down days and down moments internally. I never tried to, you know, let those moments out or, you know, express those emotions or those feelings. But I had a lot of hurt days, because there were days when, you know, I would see other kids and their parents, you know, coming to get them. I would wonder like, oh man, I wish, you know, my dad was here. And, you know, I'm very much so grateful for the father that I do have, or the fathers that I do have. But that void was always missing, because there was a certain piece of me that I always felt I would never know or would never get to see, would never understand. I would always have these questions. What does our name mean? Why am I named after you? What was the tale of my being? How did I come to exist? You know, all of those questions kind of lingered. I was bullied as a kid for several years, and I always wondered like what it was about me that was so different, because while I had this void, the void became my superpower in a sense, that I had to kind of teach myself how to live and exist spiritually so that I wouldn't be harmed while I was in my kind of earthly situation. So I've always had this kind of disconnect and connectedness between the spirit realm
realm, and that I've always been able to kind of channel this energy in and out of those realms at the same time. But I always thought and credited it to my father, like that was a gift that God gave me to see, to hear, to understand, to feel, and to know in ways that I would not normally know because he was not here physically with me. I think most people would imagine this kind of imagery of two hands reaching for plexiglass, kind of being able to see the reflection but not actually being able to touch what's on the other side. And what I will say is that the relationship between my father and I, as it pertains to him existing in my imagination as ancestor and mine as being in this moment, my primary point of contact and communication is feeling. There actually isn't just because I can't actually touch him. It's literally like when I hear myself speak, I feel the vibrations move through my body as if it's like it's his voice and not mine. When I'm up preaching, when I'm singing, like I said, like I conjure these gifts, but they don't actually exist for me and to me independently. They actually exist in conjunction with his spirit, because his gifts exude through me, because it's one migration of the soul. Like it's still his soul living, and that soul is what carries those gifts.
So I didn't know about you. I didn't know about you while I was at Morehouse. Maybe I may not have known about you until Dewey got to Atlanta. So I don't know how many years he's been in Atlanta. But it's some kind of way you are related to Dewey?
Yeah, cousins.
Yes, okay. So I came to Atlanta for something for Dewey, and he mentioned you in passing. So I was like, man, did y'all freeze his sperm? I didn't know what was happening. Yeah, I didn't know what he meant. Yeah, really. Because I didn't, and by that time you had to have been in middle school, at least. You had to be in middle school before I even knew that you were alive in the earth.
I think you've been given a legacy that is one that's unique. I think the name that you have is a stellar one. I don't think any of the experiences of what you've gone through, not knowing him, I don't think none of these things have happened for you to maintain anything that's status quo. I also find it interesting that many of our conversations dealt with both of us trying to articulate the peace in finding your own path. Because everybody expected you to be just like your predecessor. You know, to do it just like they did it, to say it like they did it, to sing the songs like they were singing. And ironically, you know, as I said earlier, Donald Parsons was the guy we listened to a lot. He was both of our favorites at one point. And we would listen to him just because of the thoughtful way in which he presented, you know what I mean? The vocabulary and the style and the approach. So the thinking was there. And I think what is so amazing here is that you've been bequeathed a legacy that I think would be disrespectful to him if you look like anything that he looked like. I think people, you have to be careful to not allow the labels that people had with Aric B. Flemming to stifle you or to contain you. I think in the same way I believe God would have used him to push the church forward. I believe that a lot of what you're doing now is going to be to push us and challenge us to be better. And I don't think you should ever hold back from who you're called to be. I know he wouldn't want that. I know whatever thought processes you have, whatever you believe, and he would also not be intimidated by engaging thoughts and discussing different types of philosophical presuppositions, you know, to really just chase it, you know what I mean, whatever it may be. I do think that your grandfather was very helpful. You know, your grandfather always talked to him about Howard Thurman. Mm-hmm. And he talked a lot about Howard Thurman to him and to me, and which was unique because Thurman is not typically what the traditional Baptist preacher. You wouldn't think that, you know, Reverend Timothy Flemming would be trying to push Howard Thurman to his son, but he did, and so building the library and thinking outside of the box. Now, you know, so how do you incorporate that into some type of, you know, not just, you know, orthodoxy, but, you know, how do we put that into the tenets of orthopraxy, I guess, in terms of what we do. So I think he would have helped the church. I think your father's role galvanized young people to make them excited about church again. And I think you're going to do the same thing. I think it's going to be an integration of faith in the academy, because a lot of questions and things have happened now that the approach that we took in the late 80s, early 90s won't be effective. And that's why I think your journey has to be different. And I don't think you ought to be intimidated by it. You know, you embrace it. Be a real.
I think you carry his mantle, but you don't carry his burden, which is a blessing. So the generation that you are going to minister to doesn't know your grandfather. And you would be running at a disadvantage if your father was pastoring in this city. And I don't know if you would even know how to appreciate it, but finding your own voice. So you are classically a rebel without a cause. And so all of what it is that you represent in ministry, these dreads, you wouldn't have them if your father was alive. you wouldn't be having these 2 chains on. You'd be in a suit because while we were wearing crisscross and Timberlands, your father never wore that. He was more conservative than any of us. Or you may be doing all of this. The beauty is that you are painting on a blank canvas and able to move forward. The reality is it is hard to be a success if your father is successful. So Ronald Reagan's son is a failed ballerina. Michael Jordan's sons never made it past JV. And so when you look at the landscape of the black church, most sons of great preachers can't preach because they are able to have their father's success without knowing his sweat and sacrifice. So God knew in the intention of your future that you needed that missing integer. And as crazy as it sounds now, it's going to make you a better preacher. That God had to skip a generation in order to get to you.
You know, one of the things about growing old is that you don't become aware that the clock is ticking and the calendar is turning until someone I've taught comes in and says, I want you to meet my son. And it really shakes you when they say, like they did yesterday, I want you to meet my grandson. And you think, oh my God, I feel all right, but I must have surely been here much longer than I realized. And so just to hear you remind me a moment ago that I taught your grandfather, your father, and you, that must have been buried in my subconscious because you summoned an awareness of a fact that further makes the point of how long I've been here. And the miracle, so that's 3 generations. Your autobiography will have to be titled the Flemmings of Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. And all of you have music in you. It comes out in your preaching. You have rhythm. Or as the students would say, you've got soul. Well, look at where it has landed you. You've already stood in the Phillips Brooks pulpit in Harvard Yard. And now you're a Harvard man, in addition to being a Morehouse man. Well, we're very proud of you, and we know the end is not yet. So, do what you do, and the world will come to see you.
I think one of the things that Aric would say to his son, Aric Jr., and I'm getting a little emotional when I think about it, because I remember when his son was born, and just to see how God has blessed him and what all he's been able to accomplish. I'm so proud of him. He's my nephew, and I think one of the things Aric would say to him is be faithful. Just be faithful to the God that called you. At the end of the day, don't preach for popularity. Don't preach for prestige. Don't preach for possession. But preach to be faithful to the God who called you. Aric, his father, and this is what made Aric so special. He loved people. He had a heart for people. One of the things I believe he would want his son to know and to do is just to love people. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And when you love people, I mean, God will take you places that you never imagine. And so that's the thing I believe he would say. Just be faithful to God, be faithful to God's people. And when you stand with integrity, have character. When people hear you, when people look at you, let your word be your bond. Say what you mean what you say. And hey, I think that's what Aric will want him to know.
I want to say one last thing here about Aric and I, and we're going. Aric said something that Malcolm heard about 2-3 weeks ago when people were comparing us. He said, I'm no better than my father. I'm just more equipped for my generation. Because every preacher must be equipped for his generation. What I use now, if I'd used it 30 years ago, folk would have walked out. Times change.
Great is thy faithfulness, oh God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thy changeth not. Thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, oh, thy forever he will be. We don't know where we come from. We don't understand that we came from people who've always had to deal with problems. Black man, you must understand where you come from. You must understand that you come from a creative people of potential that took the bad parts of the meat and made chitlins and gizzards. You've got to understand these people were not given anything, but I want to suggest to you, these people are operating in divine activity because watch this. I told you at the beginning, in the beginning was God and nothing. Your grandmamas had themselves and nothing, and they took nothing and made something. You've got to understand, your grandmama was the one who took $20 and stretched it out to the whole week with no gas in the tank. You've got to understand where you come from, a people that have always been able to take nothing and make something. They've always been able to take the worst of situations and make the best of situations. You've got to understand that's the stuff running through your veins. You are not who they say you are. You've got to isolate yourself. Isolation is necessary because it's when you let some people go and you let some stuff go and learn how to get by yourself that God will come meet you. Benjamin May said, I'd rather go to hell by myself than stumble into heaven following a crowd. And I know that some of you love to get to church on Sunday so you can worship with everybody, feel the spirit, get some strength to face another week. But I got to tell you, you ain't really experienced God until you've been driving in the car by yourself in prayer and worship, having flashbacks, thinking about where God has brought you from, getting ready to pull over because you're about to have an accident. You ain't really experienced God until you've had to cry late in the midnight hour. Yeah, church is good, but you ain't really experienced God until you've had to smuggle yourself in a corner and dance till your shoes came off. You ain't really experienced God until you first learn how to have church by yourself. I can't hear nobody in here. Where you don't need a praise team to sing, where you don't need the choir to sing your favorite song because you feel good. All you got to do is think about the fact that God woke you up this morning and he started you that you are situated currently in, and the attack of your sickness and the sufferings that are present are not worthy of being compared to the future that is to be revealed in you. But being made whole is something altogether different. I hope y'all ready for this because it is indicative of the fact that I'm not only free from being sick and dependent and surrounded by sick people, but being made whole also means that I lack nothing. There it is. 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 Hold on. Watch. Whoa. He said, being made whole means that I lack nothing. What do you mean, preacher? I'm here to suggest to you that when God makes you whole, he's not just giving you back your life. He's not just giving you back your health. He's not just giving you back strength. But this is for the 10 saints in the room that'll prophesy. God said, I'm not just giving you strength, but I'm giving you back everything you lost in the process. He said, I'm going to give you back everything you lost in the process. And here it is. Here's the title. I hear the Samaritan saying, I came back to get it all back. There it is. Slap somebody high five and say, neighbor, I don't know what you came to do, but I came back to get it all back. Come on, put me in. Through 38 years of loneliness, of bitterness, insecurity, and self-hatred, just to get to this man's heart. It's been 38 years since he's been able to see himself without despair and desolation. And how many years of stuff is Jesus gonna have to climb through to get to yours? Here we are, brothers and sisters. He's been dealing with the situation for 38 years, and all he can do now is fathom why it's absolutely impossible to be made well. Because this is all he's known, illness, for the last 38 years. But I've come to tell somebody that no matter how much Jesus has to climb to get to you, I came to serve another notice that God will not let you die until you've been made whole.
Suggests that Jesus had returned from his house in Capernaum after traveling a long distance, and many had heard he was in town and were determined to call virtue out of his body for the benefit of their own healing, their own well-being, their own victory over their imminent struggles. And so they came to him in need of breakthrough and relief as word spread around that Jesus had returned to Capernaum. Needless to say, they saw his presence as an object of comfort and relief for their troubles. Just being around Jesus was enough. I want to parenthetically pause here and tell you something. May this Lenten season reveal to us the power of being present with the compulsory, inescapable struggles of other people, even as we struggle with the enemies that lurk within us every day. And just as we would expect, as we would see, as we would collectively observe, Jesus begins ministering to them regardless of their exigencies to sacrifice more of himself and his virtue even before he took one step on the Via Dolorosa to an inevitable crucifixion. And while knowing this, Jesus began to teach them anyway. But he taught so well until the house was completely full, that no additional people were able to get in. I'd like to drop another nutritious nugget in your spirit and tell you that whatever you do, do it so well until you fill the house.
I'm going to tell somebody in this room, stop worrying about the devils that you will face tomorrow. God will give you the same strength tomorrow that he gave you to fight today. You didn't even think you would make it this far, but look at you now. You're stronger because of it. You're wiser because of it. You're better because of it. Why are you worried about tomorrow when Jesus said, look at the birds of the air and the lilies of the field? Do they sow or store away in barns? No, they dare not. And yet your heavenly Father, he feeds them every day. Are you not more important to God than birds and flowers? Surely the same God that feeds the birds and the flowers are going to make sure you eat every single day. I've come to tell somebody in this room, stop worrying about how you gonna make it next week, because if you shared your testimony, you didn't know you were gonna make it this far. If you shared your testimony, some of you didn't know you would make it to see today, but God said, I'll bless you day by day. He said, I'm gonna magnify the miracle on your life day by day. Touch somebody, tell them everything that I need today, his hand is gonna provide today. Run and tell two people, run.
I come from a rich preaching tradition, and it's not one that particularly orients itself toward activism against oppression, but activism against daily struggles of the everyday mother, single mother, in church congregations, bringing her kids to service every Sunday, finding ways to feed them with no money. That mother is who I was raised to speak to. But while I was taught to speak to this mother, I was also told simultaneously that I could not sing to her.
So when he came to me and talked to me about doing this Rebirth project, I was really excited because in all the years that Aric has been here, he's heard the stories, he's watched the videos, and he has, again, just been around Mount Carmel all of his life, to hear people say you're like your dad, or you look like your dad, or you preach like your dad. But this has allowed him an opportunity to really delve into who his dad really, really, really was. And I am really excited that he gets to experience that in his own way. He gets to learn of who this phenomenal man was, so much so that he's making the connections himself in terms of how much he really is like his father was in terms of preaching, being animated. There are days when Aric walks in the room, and again, I am floored because looking at him reminds me of looking at his father. His hands and his nail beds are just like Aric's. His demeanor, his smile. But more importantly, his heart. Aric has a genuine heart and a genuine love for God and a genuine love, for God's people. And, it's amazing because I remember when Big Aric was killing it and preaching, and Pastor Flemming was so proud, and he would be like, I'm going to send this tape to Morehouse and, show Dean such and such. And Big Aric would be behind him saying, no, because the humility was really, 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 really authentic. It was really real. And that's how little Aric is.
I was told the true definition of a man was to never cry, work till you're tired, got to provide, always be the rock for my fam, protect them by all means, give you the things that you need, baby. My relationship is suffering, trying to give you what I never had. Say I don't know how to love you, babe, but I say show me the way. I keep my feelings deep inside, I channel them with my pride. I'm trying desperately, baby, just work out here. Show me the way to surrender my heart. God, I'm so lost. Teach me how to love, how I can get my emotions involved.
God has allowed you to complete what your daddy couldn't complete. He got to his senior year at Morehouse and the Lord took him. God let you finish the mission.
Aric Bernard Flemming Jr., cum laude.
Teach me how to love.
Aric Bernard Flemming Jr. Aric will continue in his pursuit of music and ministry after HDS. He is grateful for his family and friends for all of their support and their faith in him as he journeys ahead.
And Jesus is saying to each and every one of you this morning, if you want to know God, you got to come through me. If you want to know what Timothy Flemming preached like, you want to know what he acted like, you want to know what he talked like, look at me. Because he that hath seen me hath seen the Father. Well, let me say it like this. He that hath seen Pharaoh Jr. hath seen Pharaoh. To be alive, to be living, to function, to exist, to matter, to qualify, to just be human,
or to even just be, regardless of the intricacies that differentiate us in practice. No one has the authority to mishandle your sacredness. Why? Because you are not dependent upon them to live. You are already breathing.
So the entirety, the meaning of this entire project is actually sermonic. Most people will not imagine this as a sermon, but I have literally preached from beginning to end with the point in mind that you are not the narrator of the story or the history writer, that there is somebody above you that knows the end of the story and the beginning of the next one before you can see or even realize what you've missed. God has already orchestrated what's coming next. But the traditional ear knows how to recognize when they're being preached to in a sermon versus when they're being preached to sermonically through artistic expression other than sermon writing, because we also understand that sermon writing is an artistic expression of our ancestors. What I want to be able to do in ministry is to use this kind of drawing, this pulling, this tugging at my spirit that I have to constantly preach, whether I like it or not. Sometimes I just open my mouth and before I know it, I'm preaching to somebody. It just kind of happens inevitably, right? What I want to be able to do, though, through other forms of artistic expression, namely an album, namely this movie, namely so many other things, stage plays, songwriting, anything as it pertains to artistic expression. I want to be able to preach sermons through those modes unexpectedly, to be able to reach those who have tuned themselves out of what sounds like a sermon. And so when they see this film and they see the rebirth and they see, oh, that looks like the son is taking up the mantle of the father, and I don't even go to church, but I want to see that film. That's a dope film. It's like, yeah, please come see the film, because what I want to do is encourage you and tell you through this film, right, the entire process of this film, through this film, let this be an example, a reminder that the Spirit of God is always with you, that God will literally never leave you or forsake you, and that you are not the history writer, but that there is somebody greater writing the narrative of your life in conjunction with you, that will help you get to where you're supposed to get to, even in moments that you don't understand, namely the tragic passing of my father, but the grace, and I'm not saying this boastfully, but I literally see myself as a reminder of God's grace for so many different people. My whole life's existence is a reminder that God loves us and that God's grace abounds when there's no understanding.
In your grace, it was your grace, what I deserve.
Some folks have money and their troubles are few. Some folk have loved ones to show them how to do. But if you ask me how, I tried to get along. Oh, this is my story, Lord, and This is my song. I'm leaning and depending. Oh, I make it through the storm. I know I'm gonna make it. I'm leaning and I'm depending through heartache, hurt, and harm. I've been leaning and depending all through the darkest night. I'm leaning and depending, Lord God is gonna make it right. Listen, this is my verse. Coming up on the rough side is the only way I know. You're looking at a child of God. Although my steps are slow, but listen, but if you ask me how I made it, through. I've been leading and depending, Lord, how about you? You go back through all your years in school, and folk wonder how you made it. Some of them laughed at you and said you were nothing. I've been leading and depending. Oh, I make it. I know I'm gonna make it through the storm. How many of you have been leaning on the Lord? I'm leaning and depending through all my heartaches, my hurt, and my harm. I made it because I'm leaning. I'm leaning. I'm leaning. When I don't have no money, I'm leaning. When the doctors give you up, you lean. When your friends turn their back on you, I'm leaning and depending all through the darkest night. I'm leaning and depending. Oh, I'm leaning and depending. Listen here, I'm leaning and depending. Every day I'm just leaning and depending. Sometimes I'm up and I'm down, but I'm leaning. Yeah, leading and depending. You ever had to lead on it? You got to lead on it and depend on him. That's how I made it. That's how I made it. When I look back, that's how I made it. That's the only way you're gonna make it.